Welcome back to Beat the Big Guys. I'm your host, Sandy Rosenthal. And today our guest is originally from the great state of Washington, more specifically Seattle. And her name is Amy Nelson. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks so much for having me.
You are so welcome. I personally am very excited about this conversation we're about to have. Having personally been involved with big guys, I always love to talk to someone else and share notes. But first, for those of you who are not familiar with my guest, let me tell you a little bit about her before we get started. Amy Nelson is the founder of The Riveter, a venture-backed company launched in Seattle in 2017. The Riveter began as a co-working and community startup and pivoted during the pandemic to become a career and media platform for women, providing the courses and tools needed to build the work life they want with thought leadership. I have that right? Thought leadership?
Yep.
I look forward to talking more about that. Amy is the mother of four daughters, 10, 8, 7, and 5, and still she found time to talk with me today. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I'm excited.
In addition to raising 30 million in venture capital to grow The Riveter, Amy has been published broadly, including in and on outlets including Newsweek, The Today Show, BuzzFeed, The Washington Post, The Seattle Times, and more. In this episode today of Beat the Big Guys, Amy and I will talk about her public battle with Amazon after having her life all but destroyed by Amazon's unfounded, hostile legal action against her and her husband. So Amy, without further ado, you need to do something. That's okay.
So sorry, my daughter's Apple Watch was going off. I apologize.
All good, all good. The producer Landry will just edit that out. Okay, we're
Sorry.
all good. Okay, Amy, take it away. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thanks so much, Sandy. I really appreciate the chance to be here and to tell my story. I know you've gone up against some of the biggest companies out there, and it is never easy. And it's also not, these stories are not often told by the media, by journalists. And so I appreciate the opportunity. Um, I think the place to start would be going back to 2020. If you set the scene, I lived in Seattle with my husband. We had four little girls under the age of 6. I had started my company, The Riveter, a few years before. I had 140 employees. It's growing like gangbusters. And my husband had recently left his career at Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud subsidiary of Amazon, to start his own real estate development company. He had a history working in industrial real estate development, joined AWS in 2012, and helped them build data centers. Data centers is where the internet lives. If you're not familiar, the internet does not actually live in a cloud. It lives in big buildings across the world full of computers. And it's a very specialized type of real estate development because you need power, water, fiber, all of these things to make a data center work. And my husband had been at AWS from when the company was like 5,000 people to, thousands and thousands and thousands. And he was excited to go out on his own and build data centers around the world. And he was having incredible success in his first year on his own. It is kind of like the gold rush with data centers now as the world leans into technology and AI. And then the pandemic came, which was its own kind of like battle, which I thought would be the battle. But 2 weeks after the shutdowns in America, we got a knock on our door, and it was the FBI. It was around 6:45 in the morning, and we had a glass door. And I came downstairs to the knock, and I saw 2 people standing outside. And I was like, has there been, is it like outbreak? Has there been something terrible that happened with the pandemic? Are these the health service people? I kind of looked at them, and then they pulled out badges, and it said FBI. I had a baby on my hip. And I opened the door and they asked to speak to my husband. So I called for him, and, I looked at my husband square in the eye because before I started my company, I was a lawyer. And I said to him in front of the FBI agents, you can't talk to these people here without a lawyer, which people have such trouble saying because they think they sound guilty if they won't talk to law enforcement without a lawyer. But law enforcement are not your friends. And so you should always have a lawyer with you. And so they handed my husband a couple of letters, one telling him he was the target of a federal criminal investigation being run out of the Eastern District of Virginia related to Amazon data center transactions. and another letter telling him that they intended to seize his funds. At that point in time, I had never heard of something called civil forfeiture. But if you don't know, civil forfeiture is a process whereby local, state, and federal governments can seize your money or your assets on the suspicion of a crime. They don't have to charge you with a crime and they don't have to prove a crime. And there's no due process because you are not on the other end of the civil forfeiture, your asset is, and assets don't have due process. At that moment in time, we were both we had no idea really what this was about. And, I was very familiar with my husband's company and what they were doing and who had invested in his company. So, it started what has been now almost a 5-year journey, where my husband, we sought legal counsel. And it turned out that my husband was being accused of depriving Amazon of his honest services. It's a very nebulous federal crime that they can charge you, the DOJ can charge you with for depriving your private employer of honest services, which doesn't have a definition. We learned so much over this period of time. And more than anything, we learned that when you are caught up in the wheels of the system, of the legal system, of the justice system in America, it's something that just kind of starts and it goes, and it is incredibly hard to stop it. It turns out that Amazon had gone to the DOJ. They had hired a former federal prosecutor from the Eastern District of Virginia to lobby his former colleagues still at the Eastern District of Virginia. And they had accused my husband of taking kickbacks to steer real estate deals. My husband did not do this. But we had to spend 4 years proving his innocence. The DOJ investigation lasted for 4 years. The FBI raided our home. Again, this is over allegations of employment violations. The FBI raided our home, 4 agents, 4 little terrified girls. The government did seize all of our assets. In late May of 2020, during the pandemic, on a random Tuesday, I got a notice that my Wells Fargo account was overdrawn. And I went and checked my bank account, and it said that money had been taken by order of the FBI. And I yelled for my husband, and we learned that all of our bank accounts had been seized. And they weren't frozen, they were taken. My husband's business accounts were seized. We helped my father financially, who was 2 weeks post a kidney transplant. He'd been dying. They seized his assets because they thought he was laundering money for my husband. And I mean, it's just the start of a wild journey. Essentially, it's kind of hard to encapsulate, but we then, it was a battle for survival and to prove my husband's innocence. I think in America, we're promised that you're innocent until proven guilty, but that's not how it works in action. The government ultimately held our funds for 22 months where we had no ability to fight to get them back. We could do nothing. So in that period of time, we ended up selling our home that we'd worked very hard to buy, selling our Seattle home, selling our car, liquidating retirement, borrowing money, making money. And again, we had 4 little kids, and we eventually had to leave Seattle. And we lived with my sister in California. Then we lived with my husband's parents in Hawaii, and then ultimately came to Ohio to live with my parents when my father was well enough post-transplant that we could be around him. And during this period of time too, the government was telling my husband they were going to arrest him. One thing I learned about this process is that prosecutors have a lot of different tools to try to get you to agree with their theory of whatever happened in the world. And in America, 98.3% of Americans who are accused of a federal crime plead guilty. One of the reasons we have such a high plea rate is that prosecutors can seize your money, so you don't have the ability to fight, to pay lawyers, let alone eat. We had asked, when they seized our money, we asked the prosecutors if we could have some money back to feed our 4 daughters. And the prosecutor said to our lawyers, they can have some money back to feed their kids if he'll just plead guilty. There was a moment in there at that moment in time where I felt like I don't know how to love this country anymore. But then I realized I do deeply love America, and these prosecutors are the people who are not respecting the constitutional rights that we're given. And so part of what we could do for our kids was teach them that you don't give in to a bully and you fight. Amazon met with the DOJ over 100 times to try to secure criminal charges against my husband. Ultimately, though, we fought back. And one of the ways we fought back was through the civil legal process. My husband sued Amazon, then Amazon also sued my husband. And through that process, we were able to get all of Amazon's communications with the government. And through that, we were able to tear apart everything Amazon had accused my husband of. After years of fighting, the DOJ eventually closed their investigation without charging my husband. But not only that, the DOJ ended up returning our money as long as we promised not to sue the DOJ. That was the requirement to get our money back. And then also, they ended up vacating plea agreements from alleged co conspirators. Four men had said that they had helped my husband violate his honest services to Amazon. Through the civil legal process, though, a federal judge had agreed with us that my husband had not only not committed a crime, but had not violated his Amazon employment agreement. My husband acted completely within the bounds of Amazon's contract. And so the federal prosecutors were faced with a situation where they had gotten four men who didn't work at Amazon to plead guilty to helping my husband violate his Amazon employment duties when my husband hadn't violated those duties at all. And so federal prosecutors took what I think is a legally unprecedented step in American history and vacated four pleas in a criminal investigation. We also beat Amazon in Amazon's civil case, which they're now appealing. But it's been a real lesson to me in how to take on power. At the beginning of this, I felt like, how do we even begin to fight this? This is Amazon and the Department of Justice. It's a $1 trillion company and an agency that can go through all of our bank accounts, all of our emails, all of our phones, which they did. They went through everything. But one of the ways that we fought back and that I'm really passionate about and that I have learned through my career as a lawyer and an entrepreneur was through telling our story. You know, in America, when you're accused of a crime, you're kind of told to be silent and be quiet, and many people are ashamed. I think I realized through this that there was nothing to be ashamed about and that we were going to speak out and pour sunlight onto what was being done to us. And I think that really saved our life. And the great thing about this modern world that we live in is that no one can really keep you off the stage. We're very lucky to have social media in that way. And, you know, a year and a half into our battle, I decided to just go onto TikTok, which I thought was a dancing app, and start telling our story. And people listened. And today, across TikTok and Instagram, I have around 350,000 followers that tune in to this legal battle and to hear our story. And they've discovered how this has gone as I've discovered it. Like, I remember the day I saw an email between a federal prosecutor and Amazon when Amazon first went in to pitch the crime. And the federal prosecutor wrote to Amazon, "Please don't worry. We've hand selected our two very best prosecutors for Amazon's important matter." And I remember thinking, well, who gets the B team? Is it the Olympic gymnasts who accused Larry Nassar? Is it Larry Epstein's victims or Jeffrey Epstein's victims? Because why does Amazon get the A team here? And why is it an important matter? And would I get the same benefit, or is there special treatment? And I remember sharing that story with my followers, and there was this kind of collective, like, this is how it works. And we finally get to see that this is how it works. There is not one rule of law for all. There is in America, of course, special treatment for the wealthiest and the most powerful. And it goes right to the root of everything. And so, you know, I'm proud of how we fought. We shouldn't have had to fight, but I'm proud of how we fought. And I hope that our fight can both help take apart corrupt systems like coercive plea bargaining or like civil forfeiture, and then also help people feel less alone who are going through this, because so many people are subject to unjust prosecution in this country.
It's going on everywhere, somewhere, every day in America,
Mhm.
for sure. Well, I'm proud to know you. I'm just flabbergasted by your perseverance and how hard it must have been. I mean, the pandemic was hard enough
Yeah.
without having this on top of it. So, um, I have so we have so little time, and I have so many questions, but let I want to you point made a couple of incredibly good points, and one of them was that it was what happened to you. It wasn't just the federal government and just Amazon. They were working together, and
Mhm.
often when in fact, usually when the big guys, you know, try to do something that they shouldn't be doing, it's a partnership like that, and of course
Mhm.
that makes it really hard. But don't be surprised by that. That's how it works. With in my case, it was the Army Corps of Engineers and a trade group called the American Society of Civil Engineers. They worked together,
Mhm.
but they made as will happen with the big guys, they make big mistakes that through whether it's through arrogance or clumsiness, they make big mistakes and they get caught. I wanted to mention that also. I couldn't help but notice. I did read about your travails in a newspaper article, and I couldn't help but notice that the law applied to you is the same law they use when they're going after criminal syndicates and drug cartels.
I mean,
That,
they did. Yeah. Yes.
am I
Amazon.
right? Did I read right?
Yes. Amazon accused my husband of violating the RICO, the racketeering statutes in America that they use for mobsters and drug gangs. And I mean, that was really just kind of a stunning moment when that happened. I was like, my God. But, I will say too, like, there was a point where the FBI agent who was leading the investigation said to my husband's lawyers, like, he's like a gang lord. He's like the head of a real estate gang. And I'm like, what? I think sometimes one thing I've learned, we all have confirmation bias. And when you're a prosecutor or an FBI agent, like, you're looking for the crime, right? And so like you kind of approach everything from one perspective and then kind of back into that. And that's not how the law is supposed to work.
And another thing, Amy, you mentioned, which is so true, is the law enforcement are not your friends.
Mhm.
Now, we need law enforcement and they do good work, but they are not your friends. And the same holds true for the media. They are
Mhm.
not and never will be your friend. They do good work. I am very grateful personally, as you were grateful to the help that you got from the media just by telling the story. But the reporters are not your friends, and don't ever forget that. And be careful what you say in front of them. It happens quick often where you say something off the record, and afterwards say, "Oh, I meant that to be off the record," and they'll say, "Too late."
Yeah.
So, they're not your friend. However, we do need the media. The media is a free way to advance your message, a free way to expand your outreach. So you need the media, but just beware, they're not your friends.
I mean, we desperately need the media, and I have such concerns over, kind of the state of the media right now because, our newspapers are for profit and they depend on the revenue from advertisements. And today, those advertisements, I mean, one of the biggest global advertiser is Amazon. It is the benefactor of media in this country and around the world, but also big pharma, other big tech companies. And so if you're up against those people that are providing profit for media, it becomes a very tricky situation.
Hmm.
Something else I encountered, and I encountered this in a million different ways, but um, this was happening. This started under Trump's DOJ and continued under Biden's DOJ. I think neither of them knew about it, right? This is just an investigation happening in one DOJ office. But during the Biden presidency, a lot of journalists would say to me, "We can't write about this because it gives credence to what Donald Trump is saying about the DOJ." And that was not a message that they were going to put into the world.
Interesting.
And that felt very complicated for me because, like, okay, the sacrifice of my family is okay because you don't want to give Donald Trump any support for what he's saying. And, listen, like, whether you hate or love Donald Trump, like, we have had President Clinton recently went on a show and talked about how he believed the FBI threw the 2016 election to Trump by talking about Hillary's emails completely against FBI policy a week before the election. And then Joe Biden recently said when he pardoned his son that his son had been like the victim of selective prosecution. Like, and then obviously Trump says that the DOJ can be leveraged for lawfare. We have 3 American presidents who believe their families have been personally impacted by what the DOJ and the FBI can do to people. And if you have 3 American presidents saying that, it's a real issue and the media should report on it. I'm
That's a
really,
that's
yeah.
a subject for a whole nother episode, but agreed
Mhm.
on that. I also want to talk for just a moment about anonymity. The the accusations were brought to the feds anonymously. Do I have that right?
Well, the accusation was brought to Jeff Bezos anonymously, and then Amazon went to the DOJ.
Okay. But initially it was an anonymous tip.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I really caution all our listeners to always beware when anything is done anonymously. There is a reason, and 99.9% of the time, it's not a good reason. It's not a good reason. It's a bad reason that it's anonymous. And and fortunately, anonymity, it was enshrined as a good thing about 20 years ago. About 20 years ago, social media began, social platforms, community platforms started at newspapers, at every newspaper in the country, where you could make an anonymous comment to a story. And it was supposed to be self-policing, and it was supposed to be for the betterment of the world. Well, it immediately got abused. And immediately, people in positions of trust or positions of elected officials, definitely elected officials, would disguise their identity, anonymous comment, pretend they were just, Landry, I'm going to start again. What immediately happened is people in a position of trust and even elected officials and appointed officials would disguise their identity, anonymous, pretend they're just an uninvolved third party observer, and then
Mhm.
use this anonymous platforms to attack a person. And
Yep.
and it was allowed to happen. It was so abused. Well, fortunately, there is not a single newspaper in this country that will let you do that anymore.
Mhm.
To leave a comment on a story, you have to tell them who you are, everything about yourself, and that's over with. But anonymous is beware. Whenever anything's done anonymously, beware. Were you able to get your money back, get all your money back? Last I read, it was only 80% of it.
We got back 85%. In 2022, almost 2 years after the government took the money, when my husband was being sued by Amazon, we were hemorrhaging legal fees and trying to raise our kids. The government offered to give us back 85% so long as we promised not to sue the DOJ. And we desperately needed the money back because Amazon was suing us. Now, Amazon waited to sue my husband until they knew the government had seized our money, which is just a form of bullying
Mm-hmm.
and just terror that was horrifying. And so we took that deal at the time, which, it's hard for me to accept it now because the DOJ ended up vacating the plea agreements that it had obtained as not in the interest of justice. So why would the DOJ not vacate our civil forfeiture settlement and give us back the other 15%? For us in this moment in time, it would be life-changing money to continue to pay lawyers, frankly. And so I have just such a disappointment about all of that and the federal prosecutors not seeing that that's the right thing to do.
I did you get it back with interest?
Oh no, we didn't get back with interest at all. And I'll tell you, it's like the things like during this process, right? We had to sell our house in Seattle with our 3% mortgage rate, which we will never have again. And Seattle's booming real estate market. We had bought our house, we put down 10% and it was $1 million house. We were in our late 30s when we bought it. And that house is now worth over $1 million more than when we sold it. That would be my four daughters' college education.
This is
And a lot of people, I struggle with a lot of people, like, you have such great privilege, like, don't cry that this happened to you. But my point to that is we do have privilege, and I'm so lucky that we were able to earn money to fight. Most people who get in scrapes like this cannot afford lawyers to fight back. And so you do not see the persecution that they go through. And it primarily happens to, people that don't look like me, folks of color, immigrants, and they are just bullied and wrecked through the legal system, and it has to stop. It
it has
has to
to
stop.
stop. It has to stop. And thank you for standing up for them. The only thing other thing I wanted to mention is how the feds are quick to go to the media and to say publicly that they're launching an investigation, but they never go to the media to tell them, "Oh, we've dropped the case." It's
Nope.
they do not. It was famously stated in the movie Absence of Malice by the beloved Sally Field, playing an actress, and that's her line that the media will not go back to that the feds will never come back and say they've dropped a case. And
No.
However, you need to know this. We need to know these things, even bad things we need to know.
We really do. And I think, it's really interesting because when the DOJ indicts someone, and my husband was never charged with any crime, but if the DOJ does charge you, they often issue a press release that they put on the website that will live on the internet forever. And they often hold a press conference. And you're like, you're holding a press conference to announce that you're accusing someone of a crime, right? Now, if you, the defendant, speak out, they can say you're witness tampering, they can say it's obstruction of justice, but they go right to the media, And I just think one reform that could help the DOJ is to not have press conferences when they're accusing someone of a crime because that person is presumed to be innocent.
I totally agree. I cannot imagine my money being taken from me for years, but I have a slight idea of what it feels like, but the tiniest little feeling. After the levees broke in New Orleans, everything was underwater, including the banks. I was evacuated to a city about 3 hours outside of New Orleans, and I was worried, will I have access to my money? And the bank's underwater. Well, it turned up that there was a Chase Bank office in Lafayette. I remember going to the office, walking in. I'm in a strange city, and after talking with the manager for quite a while, I was able to get access to my money, and the feeling of relief that washed over me. And that's just a fraction of understanding what you've been through. I
It
just can't
is
imagine.
It is challenging. It is like, I have a lot of thoughts about it because the one, it's like they took my personal accounts. I wasn't accused of anything, but my husband would like send me money, or I sent money to lawyers. They actually seized money that we had sent to lawyers to pay for my husband's legal representation. They went to the law firm client trust account and took the money. But it was very shocking. And like, I've worked my entire life since I was 15 years old, worked very hard. And it was this kind of moment of like, anything that's yours can just be gone in a moment. And a lot of people live with that reality forever, in one way or another. Maybe not because of civil forfeiture, but because of natural disaster, or, everything can be gone in a moment. And I think there's no silver lining to any of this, and it shouldn't have happened. But I do know now, like, who are you when your life is annihilated? Who do you become? How will you react? And like, I can answer that. And that's a pretty powerful thing.
And I think that that's a great ending note, unless you really feel there's something else you'd like to add.
No, no, I really appreciate you having me on.
And I have a question for you. What was your first job when you were 15?
Lifeguard.
A lifeguard.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lifeguard.
Wow. That's impressive. That's
Yeah.
impressive. Um, and if you're like my friend, who's also an attorney, who also was a lifeguard, he said to this day he doesn't like to sit on a beach. Go to
Oh,
the
I never
beach.
sit on beaches. I'm in the water. I'm with my kids in the water, my four girls. But yeah.
So you still like being around the water. Well, Amy, thank you again for joining us. I am so proud to know you. And thank you for standing up to the big guys and to helping other people, because at the end of the day, they're all the same. They're bullies. They're bigger, but they're not smarter.
That's right. That's right. And that is actually one thing to leave on. You can feel like you don't have an ability to fight these massive bullies, but because they have so much power and so much money and they think they can't be accountable, you can catch them in lies because they're sloppy, they're moving fast, and you can win.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining us.
Thank you, Sandy.
And thank you, the listeners, for joining us today. I hope you like this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on all of your favorite platforms. The video version of this episode will also be put on my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys. Okay, stay with me 1 second.